Greetings, welcome to Dungeons & GURPS. I'm Enraged Eggplant, and in this video I will tell you how I would make a D&D sha'ir in GURPS. The sha'ir originally was a magic user variant created for the Arcane setting back in the older editions of D&D, but it did make it into D&D 3.5 as a quite obscure class in Dragon Compendium Volume 1, not like there was ever another volume. The sha'ir was one of my favorite classes, at least on paper. It was very flavorful, unlike so many wizard variants, but it was also very powerful. The gimmick of this Arabic flavored class was its Djinn familiar, a tiny genie that would shift to the elemental planes and bargain for spells with the genie lords, then bring them for you to cast. In D&D, this was a bit complicated. There were diplomacy checks involved, and the time of the Djinn's absence depended on what kind of spell it was bringing. The sha'ir was also a hybrid spellcaster. He could cast Arcane and certain divine spells. I had a player with a sha'ir D&D character. He had a lot of fun playing that class. So, how do I modify GURPS Sorcery to realize this concept? First, sha'irs cast Arcane elemental spells. Originally I did have a write-up that allowed the sha'ir to cast divine spells, but not only was it cumbersome, but it also created problems with sanctity and pact disadvantages. So if you remember my video about the Wu Djinn, where I made the class a hybrid spellcaster instead of an arcane one, this time I do the opposite. This will be treated as limited scope elemental minus 10% limitation for Sorcerer's Empowerment. This covers air, earth, fire and water spells. In the original Al-Qadim setting, the elements, also called provinces of magic, were called sand, wind, sea and flame. Second, sha'irs gain their spells by sending their Djinn familiar to the elemental planes to fetch them from their genie masters. The known spells represent the spells permanently granted to the sha'ir. He does not need to send the familiar for them. Fetching a new spell, i.e. improvising one, requires the sha'ir to have his Djinn familiar bargain for the spell for 1 minute. This should apply the immediate preparation required 1 minute minus 30% limitation to the Sorcerer's Empowerment advantage. But since the sha'ir is free to do anything while his familiar is fetching the spell, I will downgrade this to nuisance effect. Improvisation takes time, minus 10%. Third, improvisation requires the Djinn to be present. This applies the granted by other, minus 40% limitation to Sorcerer's Empowerment. Note that even with no Djinn available, the sha'ir can cast his known spells. Fourth, the genie masters are fickle. All spells have the fickle minus 20% limitation applied to them. Each time a spell success roll is required, an attack roll for missile spells, a targeting roll for buff spells, and other similar rolls, the sha'ir must make an unmodified reaction roll. On a reaction of neutral or better, the ability works as expected. A very good reaction gives a +1 to the ensuing roll. An excellent reaction gives +2. On a reaction of poor or worse, the ability fails. If it wasn't already active, it refuses to activate. If it was active, it shuts down. This doesn't normally endanger you directly. For example, flight sets you down gently and insubstantiality leaves you in open space. On a reaction of very bad or worse, the ability does endanger you, or turns on you in some unpleasant way. Flight drops you like a stone, insubstantiality leaves you stranded inside a wall, your attack blasts you, and so forth. The GM should be creative. The sha'ir can try to cast a failed spell every second if he wishes to, but the reaction roll is at a cumulative -1 per repeated attempt, as the genie masters become increasingly annoyed by his requests. To eliminate this penalty, he must go for a full hour without casting any spells at all. If the Djinn familiar of the sha'ir is dead or unconscious, the genie masters become frustrated. The sha'ir has a -2 to reaction rolls when casting spells until the Gen familiar is back to normal. When rolling a critical failure on a casting roll, use the Oriental table from GURPS Thaumatology. As was already implied, each sha'ir must have a Gen familiar. This ability looks like the following. You can see it on the screen. All the 4 gens have templates that you can find by following the link in the description. After all adjustments, Sorcerer's Empowerment sha'ir costs 8 points for level 1, plus 4 points per additional level, and the sha'ir power modifier has a minus 35% value. And that's it for this video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.